Yat hey, my relatives. This is Mark Charles. It is a little bit before 1 on Monday, October 18th, and I'm sitting down to drink my second cup of coffee. And there's a few things I wanted to discuss today. I wanted to discuss the jury selection and the trial of Ahmaud and the death of Ahmaud Arbery. I also wanted to discuss a segment on Fox News that took place last week that was very disturbing, and I want to have a conversation about that. But before I do, as I always begin, let me start by acknowledging I'm speaking to you from my home in Washington, D.C., and these are the lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor and thank the Piscataway as the host people of these lands. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands and just state how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. Before we get into these other two things I wanted to talk about, one of the things I wanted to discuss or just let you know about is something I read. I saw it on the news earlier yesterday, I think, and then I read the articles today. But Mary Toya, the mother of Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland, she passed away over the weekend. And I want to extend my condolences to Secretary Haaland as well as her family. The passing of your mother must be very difficult, especially when you have such a demanding job. And so I wanted just to express my condolences to Secretary Haaland. And I encourage you to look at the article I posted. It's running on Indianz or Indianz, and it's a good article about Mary Toya and her, and Deb Haaland and her life. So yeah, I just wanted to take a few moments to remember that and acknowledge that passing. And our prayers and our thoughts are absolutely with the Haaland family this weekend or this week. Second, I want to talk about, and I'm going to share this article here. This is in the AP News, and it's an article about the jury selection to start the trial over Ahmaud Arbery's death. And if you do not remember this case specifically, it took place in Georgia, and two men, a father and son, they saw Ahmaud Arbery, a black man. The father and son, Greg and Travis McMichael, are white, and they saw Ahmaud running through their neighborhood, and they thought he was committing some crimes and had been responsible for some thefts in the neighborhood. And so they chased him in their truck and shot him. And while their friend recorded it, actually. And this is obviously was horrible, right? And the worst part of it is they didn't even get arrested until the video came out. This was not something that was immediately investigated, and they weren't arrested until the video came out. And it was compared to, and rightly so, a modern day lynching. Even the fact that the friend was recording it on video. And the trial for this is starting, and so they're going through jury selection. And I've read that they're actually issuing hundreds of summons to potential jurors, A, because of COVID, and B, because of the massive exposure this case got. But I wanted just to reflect on something in this, because as I was reading the article, and this is something most of us already know anyway, but I just want to highlight it because it really struck me as to how far we have to go yet, how much work we have to do. And I'll just read a few paragraphs of this article. The slaying of the 25-year-old black man sparked a national outcry fueled by graphic video of the shooting. Father and son Greg and Travis McMichael and their neighbor William Rhodey Bryan are charged with murder and other crimes in Arbery's death on February 23, 2020, just outside the port city of Brunswick. Prosecutors say Arbery was merely jogging when the McMichaels armed themselves with guns and chased him in a pickup truck. Bryan joined the pursuit in his own truck and recorded the now infamous cell phone video of Travis McMichael shooting Arbery 3 times at close range with a shotgun. Defense attorneys insist the 3 men committed no crime. Greg McMichael told police they pursued Arbery, suspecting he was a burglar after security cameras previously recorded him entering a nearby home under construction. He said Travis McMichael fired his gun in self-defense after Arbery attacked him, punching and trying to grab the weapon. The thing I wanted to point out about this story and about the defenses, the way they pled, which was not guilty, they didn't commit a crime, right? In the United States of America, historically, people of color's lives do not matter. Abraham Lincoln stated as such. Our Constitution states as such. We have Supreme Court case precedent stating as such. The Second Amendment was written to arm white men in order to literally do what these three men did. This is why we have a Second Amendment. This is why it was written. And the fact that it's 2021 and these white men are still pleading innocent of this murder, which was caught on film because Ahmaud Arbery had the gall to try and defend himself and to take their weapon away so they couldn't shoot him. We haven't come very far at all as a nation. And the worst part of this is right, there is no guarantee based on even recent case precedent that these three men will be found guilty. This is not a guarantee in our criminal justice system where slavery, enslavement of people of color is still legal, constitutionally protected by Abraham Lincoln and the 13th Amendment. And so there's no guarantee that these men will be found guilty because the criminal justice system was created, was designed by the founders of our nation, the framers of the Constitution, to protect white landowning men and even to arm them so that they might do what they did in this case. And this is what is so disturbing about this, is not only the fact that they're pleading this way and don't believe they've committed any sort of crime here, but the fact that this is literally how our criminal justice system was set up and the way it was intended to work and the way it worked for 250 years. So there was a comment in here in this story by members of the Arbery family, hoping that justice would happen and that there would not be a bias ruling in this case. And I don't have, let me pull the article up. I want to read that quote for you. It says jury selection could last 2 weeks or more. Arbery's father said he's praying for an impartial panel and a fair trial, saying Black crime victims too often have been denied justice. This is 2021, he said, and it's time for a change, Marcus Arbery Sr. said in an interview. We need to be treated equally and get fair justice as human beings because we've been treated wrong for so long. Right? This is a Black man who saw his son die on a video. It's 2021. And he's still saying we need to be treated as human beings because our nation and our criminal justice system does not treat people of color as human beings. We the people has never in our entire history meant all the people. And my prayers, I pray alongside him. And I thank him for his words. And I do want to see justice be done in this case. Next, I want to talk about, and maybe you've heard of this, maybe you haven't, but last week there was a segment on Fox News where two of the hosts, Rachel Campos-Duffy and Jesse Waters, and actually Rachel's husband, had a dialogue about the fact that Columbus Day is being replaced by Indigenous Peoples Day. And they were especially taking issue with remarks that Vice President Kamala Harris made at the National Congress of the American Indian over the weekend, where she acknowledged the horrific history, the violent and the violence committed against Native Americans by our nation, and in the spirit and in the legacy of Christopher Columbus. And of course, Fox News hosted, and I'm putting in, this is an article in Native News Online. It's titled Fox News Attacks Native Americans After Vice President Harris Calls on Americans to Reckon with Its Shameful Past. And then I'm also going to share another link where the video resides. And this link is on, unfortunately, I couldn't find it in a less partisan website, but this is on Media Matters, and Media Matters is fairly left-leaning and loves to be pretty partisan, but they had the whole 5-minute video in there in this article titled Fox Host Blames Native American Struggles on Alcoholism and Government Dependency. And I encourage you, if you're able to watch that video. It's almost 6 minutes long, and you'll see the whole segment that aired on Fox and the dialogue between Rachel Campos-Duffy and Michael Waters, I think his name is, in their discussion. Jesse Waters, sorry. And I watched the article. It's as you would expect for two white people on Fox News defending Christopher Columbus against Indigenous Peoples Day. The article, or the interview, the dialogue is dripping with American exceptionalism and decrying the cancel culture of Christopher Columbus, playing the victim card, and it's full of one-sided understanding of history, a complete lack of common memory, and is even demonstrating different views of both racism and white supremacy, which is what you would expect, right? The right is the explicit manifestations of these national values, and the left is the implicit manifestations of these national values. And the point that so many people are going to be making right now is that the right is the aggressor here, and the left are the good guys, and they want to frame this as a partisan battle. Look at what the Democratic vice president said, and look at what this administration is doing, and then contrast it with these horrible people on Fox News. And we just need to get rid of, rid our nation of these very racist views that we see. And that's the dialogue that takes place all the time, where the right does something inflammatory, the left decries it and says it's all the right's fault, and we just need to deal with that, and then we can move on and be the nation where we the people means all the people. But that's not the case, right? That's not the case. Even if you look at this last week, where Joe Biden, President Biden, he gave two proclamations a week ago. He gave a proclamation for Indigenous Peoples Day, and he gave a proclamation for Columbus Day. And he acknowledged the violence, but he still honored this history and this legacy. And that's the line that he's trying to walk very much with his administration. And it doesn't get past me that he did not give these remarks himself to the Native audience on the day after Indigenous Peoples Day. He sent Kamala Harris to go and speak. I believe she was speaking to the National Congress of the American Indian. And this is striking because Joe Biden also didn't go to the 2 presidential forums that were addressing Native American peoples. And he is not taking a bold stand on Standing Rock and all the stuff I've been talking about these past few days. And Joe Biden is absolutely trying to play the middle of the road here. And so he sends his African American vice president to speak to the natives, and he doesn't go. And she decries the violence, but we also have to remember, even when she was the Attorney General in California, she was not doing the best things for Native peoples and our communities. And so there's even some hypocrisy in her words. And then, of course, Fox News sees that, and they turn it into the partisan screaming match and say, well, the Democrats want to use their social programs and they want to use the cancel culture, and they make this into a big partisan fight. And nobody wants to have a conversation really addressing our history and what we need to do about it, right? Neither side wants to create a common memory. Even both of Joe Biden's proclamations were dripping with the myth of American exceptionalism. They were dripping with how this nation is great. Even the fact he said that we're acknowledging that this happened demonstrates our greatness, right? And it was dripping with American exceptionalism, which is rooted in white supremacy. And so while Indian country is trying to make our nation have this conversation about remembering our history more accurately and acknowledging the genocide and ethnic cleansing policies of our past and the way that has fueled the challenges that our communities are facing today. That's the conversation we want to have. But the white landowning men of the 2-party system don't want to have that conversation. They want to turn this into a partisan fight. They want to affirm both sides. They want to affirm American exceptionalism. And they don't want to make any changes. Neither side wants to make any changes. And so they inflame each other and they have this partisan fight, but they don't actually wrestle with the history. They don't actually wrestle with what actually happened, with what they're standing on, with what continues to be embedded today into our Supreme Court case precedents. And this is why I in the title of this talk, I said, I want to invite Rachel Campos-Meadows, Matthew Waters, I think that I always forget his name. What was his name? Anyway, the Waters guy, and Joe Biden. I want to invite all of them to read this book, Unsettling Truth, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery. And I want them to understand how these dehumanizing values, this dehumanizing doctrine of discovery, this white supremacy, this racism, and this sexism are bipartisan values held up by both parties. They're written into our foundations. Yes, just changing Columbus Day isn't going to fix the problem. We have to deal with the foundations that this doctrine of discovery got embedded into. And neither side is interested in having that conversation. And so they have this debate back and forth but they don't actually deal with the underlying issues. So as horrific and horrible and explicit and littered with racism and sexism and white supremacy as the comments made on Fox News were, we have to make sure that we don't allow that to distract us from the deeper conversation we need to have, which is a national dialogue on race, gender, and class, and the way that these values have been embedded into our foundations and are used by white landowning men to affirm their own exceptionalism so they don't have to deal with these horrors. And so, as easy as it is to purely place all the blame on Fox News, we have to hold them accountable, yes, but we also have to acknowledge it takes two people to do this dance, and the two-party system is playing it to a T. Fox News and CNN, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, they have the same goal, they have the same agenda, which is to maintain the status quo. What you're seeing right now with Biden softening all of his positions. As I talked last week about having a Native American Secretary of the Interior and having her walk back all of her radical stances, her opposition to drilling, her opposition to fracking, her straight up support for Standing Rock. Walk all those back so they fall in line with the white landowning male president she's serving. And so I want to encourage you not to allow yourself to be sucked into this game that the two-party system is playing with your emotions right now, especially people of color. They are going to try to convince you that Fox News is not only the problem, but they're the only problem. And Democrats are going to fix it. And that's a flat-out lie. The underlying values are deeply held by partisan values of racism, sexism, and white supremacy, and a desire to maintain the status quo. And you cannot let them play these insane games to draw us into their meaningless rhetoric that doesn't actually deal with the real problem. So Joe Biden, Rachel Campos-Duffy, Jesse Waters, and Fox News, and CNN, I invite you, I plead with you, I beg you to read this book. Learn about what's gone on in our nation. Learn about what we've done and how the two-party system has worked together to enshrine these things into our foundations. And then let's work hard to create a more accurate common memory so that we can build a healthier community. That's the dialogue we need to have. Not this childlike screaming back and forth that you're doing all the time and trying to suck us into. That's not going to work anymore. You need to deal with the underlying issues. And we need to be better about not being dragged into your childish games. I tagged, you'll see, I tweeted this earlier. I tagged Rachel Campos-Duffy, Jesse Waters, and President Biden in that post, because I want all three of them to understand that we're onto their game. We need to have a much more in-depth conversation, and we need to make some real foundational level changes that will disrupt this system that both parties are massively benefiting from. I hope this gives a little different perspective on all of the outcry that's been going out this past week. I've seen it on my social media. I've read articles about it. I've been trying to follow it. And I want to just make sure that we don't get distracted by it or detracted from what we're trying to do, which is to push this deeper dialogue that we never seem to get to, we never seem to actually have. I want to thank you for taking some time to join me this afternoon. Thank you for sitting down over my second cup of coffee. I'm grateful for everyone who jumped on live, and I'll post this up on my Instagram as well as it's going on my YouTube and my Facebook. And I look forward to seeing what kind of dialogue generates from this later. But thank you, everybody. I see Tam has been on here a little bit. I see my good friend Phil Fox is on. I see a bunch of other people, Cheryl Ann Lewis and Mo Burgess and others who are commenting. I don't often read the comments when I'm going through the actually on air, but I do go back and read them after I turn off the live stream, and I try to just get a sense of how people are responding, what people are thinking about as we go through these shows. So thank you all for joining me today. I hope you have a beautiful day. It's a great fall weather here in Washington, D.C. I also just want to share, for those of you who are in the D.C. area, this weekend, I'm actually giving a presentation at the D.C. Northeast Library. It's titled A Book Talk with Mark Charles, and it's looking at the doctrine of discovery and the book I co-authored with Sing-Chan Ra on selling truths. So there's an Eventbrite where you can get tickets. They're free. And I'm not sure if we're going to have an online version of this or not. I talked briefly with the organizer about it a few weeks ago. I didn't see anything on the invitation about there being an online option, but I'm going to talk with him probably in the next day or two to find out if they are going to stream it. I think they do stream some of these on their Facebook page. So if there is a link where you can view it online, I'll definitely make sure I share that link. And yeah, I look forward to, if you're in the DC area, especially, I invite you to join me this coming Saturday at the DC Northeast Library, and the time and date and everything else is in there. So I can't help my relatives. I hope you have a great day. Walk in beauty, and maybe learn how to walk in beauty together. Hook on that.